Williams' 2023 driver lineup equation looked quite straightforward. Retain Alex Albon for another season and upgrade Nicholas Latifi by replacing him with loanee from Alpine, Oscar Piastri. But suddenly things don't look quite so simple. So to help me, Glenn Freeman, work out why that is, we have Scott Mitchell and Ed Straw joining us, who are in the middle of travelling from the French Grand Prix to the Hungarian Grand Prix. Scott, I'm going to come to you first. What's going on with Williams' 2023 plans, and why is it that apparently the team might have a curveball to deal with now?
Yeah, so the main thing to factor into this now, basically, the new variable is the recent form of Formula 2 title contender Logan Sargent, who is a Williams Academy driver as of this season, a young American in his first year in Formula 2, and he's a guy who had he always had a lot of potential. He was a world champion in karting in the proper classes as well, because there are quite a few of those. And then all the way through his junior single-seater career, he's been a race winner in every single category he's done, but he hit budget problems a couple of years ago, and it looked like he was out of single-seaters altogether, and then he sort of cobbled together a deal to stay in Formula 3 with a lesser fancy team, and had a good but under the radar season because he'd stuck around at that level a little while because of the budget problems. He came so close to beating Oscar Piastri to the F3 title in 2020. He's never really been one of those guys who, you know, those ones that just look absolutely dead certain to get to Formula 1, your Charles Leclerc's, George Russell's, Lando Norris types. Sargent was never really one of those, but he's always been an interesting talent, one with a lot of potential, and it's really coming together now in his rookie season of Formula 2. It's not the strongest crop of drivers in Formula 2, I think we can say, this season. Sargent's marking himself out as probably the most interesting of the lot. He'd won back-to-back feature races. He got pole in France, but his bid there was undone by a clutch failure. So it's the recent momentum has stalled a little bit, but it's enough to have put him properly on Williams' radar, I think, for the first time. So Williams boss Oscar Piastri said in France that it would be a great headache to have if Sargent is suddenly a contender for this seat for next year. And I think even if he wasn't really in contention at the start of the year, I reckon he'd have been looking at a 2-year F2 programme. All of a sudden, Williams has a potential longer-term option seriously right in front of it for 2023, and it would be silly for Williams not to consider that, and Capito has hinted that Sargent is indeed among the options that they have to consider for 2023.
Yeah, that sounds like quite a nice problem to have. Ed, one man who we know won't be driving for Williams, but could have an impact here, is Fernando Alonso. So how does he fit into all of this?
Yes, well, Fernando Alonso, he's not yet confirmed at Alpine for next year. He's keen on another 2-year contract for Formula One. Alpine were quite keen on a 1-year deal, and they were thinking about 1 year and then maybe move him into their World Endurance Championship campaign with the LMDH car they're planning for 2024. But no, Fernando Alonso wants 2 more years, and who can blame him? Because with the trajectory Alpine's on, probably 2024 is going to be the stronger year compared to 2023. I think chances are we are going to see that Alonso 2-year deal happening, but until that's done, Piastri is in play as the backup choice, shall we say, for Alpine. Alpine have said that they expect both drivers to be on the grid for next year. So you never know with Fernando Alonso. There's always that slight element of something unexpected might happen. But until he's signed, sealed and delivered as an Alpine driver, then Piastri's position is slightly unclear. But I expect that will happen.
So finally, the big question we have to look at is the fate of Oscar Piastri. I think we'd all agree it's a crying shame he didn't get onto the grid this year, given his CV. As Ed has mentioned there, we should expect him to be on the grid somewhere next year. And I'm going to put the power into both of your hands now to work out what we should be doing with him and what you'd do with him if you had the power. Scott, I'm going to come to you first, because regular viewers of our channel will think that already, according to you, Piastri may have been going to Williams for next year, but we've also done a video previously where he was rumoured to be linked to McLaren as well. So tidy all that up for us and then say how you would resolve his future.
Yeah, I'll hold my hands up and admit that I have probably contributed to a little bit of confusion over exactly where Piastri will be. I will explain myself very simply in that Piastri has been tracking towards a Williams drive for some time, and I do still believe he is the favourite for that drive just because of the quality of driver that he is, how well-rounded he is, the fact that Williams has explicitly stated it will be open to a loan deal for Piastri if it decides that's the best for him, and that Alpine only wants to loan him out. So all of these things come together, and for a couple of months now he has seriously been on Williams' radar and they've been working towards that. That's why we did a video which you can probably check out on this channel. I'm sure that we can pop in a link here or somewhere to explain why that deal looked like it was going to give Piastri his F1 debut. I still think that is likely. The reason we then started to link him to McLaren is that there is no done deal between Alpine and Williams. Alpine hasn't done anything, or hadn't done anything a week or two ago when we did this most recent video, basically to confirm Piastri's future for next year. It was still open, and then within that there was very, very credible information that McLaren had started looking seriously at alternatives for Daniel Ricciardo. And within that, you have to look at someone like Oscar Piastri once you know he doesn't have a contract in place. So that's why Piastri suddenly became on the radar. I think his manager, Mark Webber, was sort of sniffing out an opportunity there as well and just wanted to play things. So Piastri is just a man in demand. So all the while it wasn't 100% with Williams, there was just this wiggle room for him to potentially turn up somewhere else. But coming back to the second part of your question, what would I do? I mean, if I'm Williams, I'm going absolute hell for leather to get Piastri in the car. I don't care if it's for a year or 2 years. Ideally 2 years, because then all the work you put in as training up a rookie, you do get a bit of payback in year 2 if there is a bit of a slower process. But he's ready for this. He's a star driver. He's a Leclerc-Russell level of driver in terms of junior pedigree. He's done loads of testing in a 2021 Alpine. He's been on site. He knows how Grand Prix weekends work. He's ready for Formula 1. Williams is the perfect place for him. Alpine want to put him there for a year or 2. If I'm Williams, no-brainer. Piastri in the seat for next year.
The one element to this that might make Williams think is this absolutely the best option is the fact that it would be a loan deal. Now, a loan deal can work really well. They did brilliantly out of George Russell for 3 years, and a couple of seasons of Oscar Piastri would still be great. But this is why Logan Sargent does slightly complicate it. Now, Williams will have done a lot of work with Logan Sargent. He'll be in the simulator. So they'll have an idea of what they think his ultimate potential is. And that's the thing that will decide whether they might think there's some benefit in trying to bring him into Formula 1 next year, depending on how the rest of his F2 season goes on. The difference being that Sargent would be entirely their driver on a nice long-term deal. They'd be in complete control of him. And that's very appealing because it means you've got this driver for however many years. There's going to be no recall clauses where he can go elsewhere. And there's always the possibility they could have a situation like they had a few years ago when Nico Rosberg retired and Mercedes had to break the glass for the emergency Bottas, which made Williams a tidy 10 million or so when they brought him in. So I think there's a lot to be gained from a driver if you think they're really, really outstanding and they're your own, but it depends on how they weigh up Sargent against Piastri. And I think, as Scott has said, Piastri is the one that probably has shown in the long term the greater potential. But that's the thing Williams has to ask. Look very, very closely at Sargent and whether they think his recent form in F2 shows he is in that Leclerc, Russell, Piastri potential. And if that's the case, then maybe you want to go that way.